We'll build this scene from scratch, including all the modeling techniques, all the tools, all the materials, lighting, and roundtable animation. Hey everyone, welcome to my new tutorial and welcome to 2026. And with the first video of the year, I really wanted to give you a lot of value, and it will basically serve as a beginner Blender course where I will give you some of the most important tools and techniques that I use on a daily basis. Though if you never open Blender and you want to start from scratch, please stop for a while. There will be a link in the description where you will find my free starter course on my website. You can just sign up, it's 100% free. It takes 1 or 2 hours to get through the course, and that one will teach you absolute basics from, how the viewport works, how the controls work, how you use modifiers, materials, lighting, and everything basic in Blender, including important things like object mode versus the edit mode. So again, if you want to try Blender for the first time with this video, go ahead and do that one first and then come back here. And with these two combined, you will get a solid understanding of Blender within a few hours. And with this one, we'll build this scene from scratch, including all the modeling techniques, all the tools, all the materials, lighting, and roundtable animation. So I really hope you will enjoy this one, and if you do, please don't forget to leave a like, and if you're new around here and want to learn Blender in 2026, hit that subscribe. Now let's jump right into Blender, and as you can see, I have the default scene right here. I don't like to modify Blender too much, so you have easier understanding of what's going on my screen if you're just starting. And first of all, we won't need some of the things here, so we can select the light, press X and delete it. And we can actually use the cube, so this is again one of the videos where it gets to shine, so let's just select it. But I want the origin point at the bottom there. So what we can do is to just push it up in the edit mode. So let's tap into the edit mode, press G then Z, and we can enter 1 and just hit enter to move this 1 meter up, because we know the default cube is 2 meter high, so if the origin point was in the middle, we only need to move it 1 meter up, and now the origin point is at the bottom. And this is really important for me, because whenever I want to snap this on a surface or scale it down and up, the origin point allows me to do that without ever changing the transform pivot point. I have the origin point ready right there, so that's why I like to either move the cube up like this or create the cube from a plane where the origin point will be at the bottom. But nevertheless, let's press Shift A, let's create a new plane right here, tap into the edit mode, and we'll scale this up 4 times. That's kind of my favorite scale for dioramas like this. So let's press S, then 4 and enter. And now to make this a little bit more interesting, we can round the corners there. So we can press Ctrl Shift and B to enable vertex bevel, and bevel this like that, and increase the number of cuts with the mouse wheel so it looks nice and smooth like this. We don't need to go too wild with this. Something like this will be enough. And now I will extrude this down because I want everything else to lie on a 0 on a Z-axis. So let's press E and extrude this down. Now the direction you're extruding really matters, because now if we go here and enable face orientation, you will see this is now red, so the normals are flipped there. So basically the object is other way around and we need to flip it back. So let's press A and Shift N to recalculate, and now you will see it will turn gray. So I really recommend to have this option enabled right here. It won't affect anything in your scene except when you have the normals flipped. So let's step out of the edit mode, and let's now select the cube, and in the object mode we can press S and scale it up to get the desired scale. Something like this will be okay, like this. But now if I press N for the side panel, you can see we have the scale of 2 and the dimensions. And anytime you would use a modifier, for example, it would scale according to the scale on the object mode. So what you can do is press Ctrl A, and that will enable you to apply some of the things, and you can apply the scale. And now if you look at what happens, now the scale jumps back to 1, so the object's original dimensions are now 4 meters. It's not scaled at all. So let's give this some shape. I will tap into the edit mode, press 2 for edge select, or you can click it right here. And to select all of the edges around this, you can hold Ctrl and Alt key and click on one of the edges, and you will see you will select all of these around. If you, for example, click Ctrl and Alt, and here you will see you will select these. So Ctrl and Alt and click, and now press Ctrl B. Now we don't need to press Shift Ctrl B because we are not beveling vertices, but we are beveling edges. So we can do bevel like this and just reduce the number of cuts with the mouse wheel to something like this. And now I want to add some more geometry, so press Ctrl R and add a loop cut right here, because I want to create that opening for our ramen shop. And now I will need some more edges on the sides here, and the easiest way to do that is to press Ctrl R to just add a new edge right here. You will see if you go this way, it will try to create a loop cut there, but here this is what I want to do. So let's left click and right click to release in place. And now with this one selected, we can press Ctrl B. You can bevel not only corners, but any edge, and it will basically duplicate your edge like this. You don't need to enable any symmetry or mirroring. You can just create symmetrical geometry like this. And now let's go for a face select or press 3 on the keyboard. Let's select this face and I will extrude this inside. But before I do, let's hit slash on a numpad to isolate this. You can see there's a local view now, and right here there's a face down there, and if I extrude this, I'm creating a new one as well. But let's do that. Let's just extrude it like this, for example. But now we need to clean it up. So first of all, we can select the first original face, press X and delete it. But you will see now this one that we extruded is there as well, and I don't need that at all. So press X and delete that one as well. So now you're left with this open geometry down here, and it will make things easier down the road. So let's hit slash on a numpad again to exit the local view. And now let's block out some other geometry. And this is what I generally like to do when I'm creating a scene. I like to create really basic primitives, basic objects, and basically just block out the scene to see how it looks. And then later I go in and add modifiers and add different details. So let's rotate this a little bit and select the top face here and press I to inset and do an inset like this. Be careful to not go so deep as to, you know, touch these vertices on the inside. And now press E to extrude this down like this. And finally, I want to duplicate this to create some more visual interest. So we can hold Alt key for a loop select and click here to select this loop. And we can press Shift D, then Z, and just duplicate it on the Z axis and just slightly move it up. We don't need to separate it at all. And now press E to extrude something like this. Maybe this will be too tall, so let's enable X-ray view, and we can now press 1 for vertex select or switch it right here and select all of these vertices on the top, press G then Z and just move them down like this. So this is very easy way how you can modify the proportions of your shape in the edit mode. And now let's toggle the X-ray back, and now press 3 for face select again, and let's select these faces on the inside. So hold Shift and select them, and now we'll press Shift D again as before, but now right click to release in place, and we'll press P and separate the selection, and that will separate it here into a new object. You will see a new cube created here because the original name of the object was cube. But if you tab out now and select that new object, you will see only the duplicated and separated geometry is available in that object, and we can now tab out and continue modifying the object. And this duplicate separate method is one of my favorites. Where I'm building something, I can reuse existing geometry with existing proportions. I don't need to create, you know, anything from scratch. So I use this quite often. So now press 2 for edge select and hold Alt key and select this loop. In the back you will see the Alt key selects everything around, and now we can press G then Y and just move this towards the front somewhere here, and now press A to select all and continue the movement. So press G then Y and just push it outside a little bit like this. And now we can press Alt E to extrude along normals. Let's just select this option and it will enable extrusion this way, but you can see it skews a little bit as you go inside. So you can enable even thickness by pressing S, and down here underneath the timeline you will see as I hit the S, it highlights that that function of the extrusion is enabled, and you will see how the geometry changes. So let's do something like this, And now nothing is red, so we don't need to flip any normals, we can just continue the modeling. So tab out of the edit mode and I will duplicate another part of the geometry. So select the main building, tab into the edit mode, and let's go for face select. So I'll press 3 and alt click this loop right here, but I will deselect these on the inside. So hold shift and just remove these from the selection. And again, I'll press shift D, right click to release, and then P and separate selection. And again, I have a new object with the separated geometry. I can tab out now, select the new object and tab back in. Press 2 for edge select right here. Alt click this loop and again alt select the loop all around and press G then Z, and we can just move this down like this. And now we can extrude this. So press A, and again, same as before, alt E and extrude along normals. And again, I will hit S for even thickness and go right about here. So this way you can add interesting details to your buildings or your objects by reusing the geometry without necessarily creating a new one. So now let's tab out. And finally, I want a big sign here in the front. So let's select the building, tab into the edit mode. And if you want to place something precisely, you can use the 3D cursor. So press 3 for face select, select the face in the front. And now if you hold Shift S, that will enable you to snap the cursor or snap to cursor. But now I want to snap cursor to select it. So just go down here and release the Shift S, or just hit Shift S and you can freely move and click here. And now you can see the cursor is moved there. So if you now tab out and create a new object, it will be created here where the cursor is. So let's press Shift A and create a plane. So now I can be sure I'm dead center in the building. So we can press R, then X and 90 to rotate 90 degrees around X axis and confirm. And now tab into the edit mode and let's press S to scale this down until we go right about here. And now press S, then X and scale it only on the X axis. Okay, and maybe we can select the edge on the top here, press G then Z and move it down slightly so it's not so high up. And now let's press A to select all and just extrude this right about here. And now we can press Shift D to duplicate, press Y, that will lock it on the Y axis, and just hold Shift for small increments and move it only slightly so these don't touch. And now we can press I for inset function and do an inset like this. And again, you can help yourselves by holding Shift for smaller increments, just like that. And now press X and delete the face. And now if you press 3 for face select, alt click this loop, you can just press E and extrude this. And this is still part of the same object. And for this one, we don't need to separate it at all. So we can just tab out and leave it like this. You have a nice sign there. And let's add a little bit more detail here in the back. I want a countertop there, and you could easily just go and hold Shift and right click to place cursor somewhere and try to position your newly created plane or a cube or something. But again, I like to reuse the geometry, already existing geometry with already existing proportions. So we can now select the building, tab into the edit mode, and I can clearly see that this edge is exactly what I want here. So press 2 for edge select, select this one, and we can just press Shift D, then Y, and move it right here. And additionally, we can press P and separate it into a new object. So tab out and select it. And now we can go back in and extrude completely new object out of it. But now we are sure that this is lining up with the wall there. It's on the certain height. So again, few tricks how to speed up your workflow. So now let's press 1 for vertex select, select this one, press G then X and move it somewhere here. And now press A and extrude, so press E, then Y and extrude it back here like this. And now again A and E to extrude. And now you can see we are flipping the normals, but nothing too bad. We can easily just press A to select all and Shift N to recalculate it. And now press 3 for face select, select the one on the top. And again, we can duplicate this, right click to release, P, enter to separate. And over time, you will really get used to all of these shortcuts and you will be able to create these things with lightning speed. So tab out, click twice to select the new object, or just select it right here in the outliner, tab into the edit mode, press 2 for edge select, and just select these two edges and press S, then Y, and scale them apart from each other. So again, I'm not moving them with G, I'm using S, and since I have both of these selected, I know that they will be scaled symmetrically like this. So again, I'm saving a little bit of time, and then press G, then X, and move it here. And now A and E to extrude like this. And we can round the corners as well. So select this edge, hold Shift, select the other one, and press Ctrl B to create a bevel and increase the number of cuts with the mouse wheel to something like this. So when we look from this side, this is exactly what I want to see, because this is the view I will be using for the final render. And now let's add some more geometry here. So type out, select the ground here, and I want to create like a sidewall curve around. So tab into the edit mode, and again, you probably guessed what I'm going to do. I'm going to press 3 for face select, select this one, and again duplicate and separate. So Shift D, P and enter to separate. I will tab out, select the new one, tab into the edit mode, and I can continue my edits. So I can press A and I to inset, and just like that, I will just hit X, delete the face, and I have a foundation for a new object. So I can just press A again to select all, and E to extrude, and there you have your curve in a few seconds. So that's about some of the rough modeling here. Now the next thing I want to do is to add some more details to the building and finish the signage. So let's create an electric box here on the side. So I will Shift and right click to move the cursor, and let's press Shift A, and we'll add a plane. Tab into the edit mode, press S to scale this down. We can press R then Y and 90 to rotate 90 degrees on Y axis, and then press S then Z to scale this up on Z axis. And now we can press S to make this a little bit larger, like this, and press E to extrude. And finally, let's press Shift D, then X, and hold Shift and move this slightly outside, and press E again to extrude one more time. K, like that. And here on the side, I want like a large blade. It really looks great on futuristic and, you know, cyberpunk buildings like this. So I'll tab out and Shift and right click here to place another plane. So let's press Shift A, add the plane. And now tab into the edit mode, press R then Y and 90 again. And let's make this a little bit larger, like this. And now let's press S then Z and make this larger on a Z axis, something like that. And finally, press 1 for vertex select. Select these two vertices by holding Shift, and press Ctrl Shift B to bevel them and reduce the number of cuts with the mouse wheel to create something like this. And now press A and E to extrude, just like that. Now we can tab out and press G then Y and move it slightly outside, so it makes this corner a little bit more sophisticated. And finally, let's block out like a ramen bowl right here on top of the building. There will be like a decoration that I want to make there. So let's select the building, tab into the edit mode, and now I'll press 2 for edge select and select these two edges on the opposite sides and hold Shift S and snap cursor there. So this way I know I'm placing it in the middle. So now tab out and let's press Shift A and we'll add a circle. And I think something like 24 or even 18 vertices should be enough here, because I will be using subdivision later. So tab into the edit mode, press 1 for vertex select, and now let's make this a little bit larger, like this. Press F to fill and E to extrude. Okay, something like this. And now press X and delete the top face. And now alt click this loop on top, press S to scale it up a little bit. And now alt click the bottom one and press Ctrl B to bevel, and it will create a nice bowl shape like that. Okay, so that's the block out, and now I want to work with the camera a little bit to see how the final scene might look. So let's look from the camera. We left the original one in place, so let's hit 0 on a numpad to look through it. And now we can go to the camera settings here, and instead of perspective, let's do orthographic view. And instead of moving the camera, we just need to edit the orthographic scale, so we can make this larger, so we can see the whole scene. But you can see this is a little bit too shallow. I would like this camera to look more from the top. And to rotate the camera around the middle of the scene, we can hold Shift S, place the cursor to world origin, so it will jump back to 0, 0, 0. And now here we can use the transfer pivot point and switch it to 3D cursor. So now if you For example, rotate the camera around the z-axis, it will rotate around your object. If you want to see this from the outside, it looks like this. It will just rotate around that 3D cursor. And if you press R for rotation and then X twice, it will enable rotation around its local x-axis, which is exactly what we need. So let's just right click here. I will go back to the camera view, press R, then X twice, and now readjust my angle like this. And in the output settings, I want to modify the resolution to something like 1600 to 1200, and then move the camera up. So press G then Z and move this up, so we wrap the scene nicely and it creates this nice isometric view for us. So that's about the layout and the composition. Now when you're finished with this lesson and you want to dive deeper and learn everything Blender, be sure to check out my courses as well, where in addition to the step-by-step instruction, you also get full in-depth explanation of all the steps and all the tools, and you get to learn everything from simple low poly design all the way to full character illustration, textured environments, a little bit of sculpting, hard surface modeling, and with the latest one, even full car animation and modeling. So if you're interested, please check out the link in the description. And now we'll go back in and refine our details in the scene. So let's start with the bevel modifier that will instantly make everything nice and smooth. So we only need to create the first bevel modifier and then we can distribute it throughout the scene to the other objects. And basically every object here except the bowl will need the bevel modifier. So let's start with the walls here, and let's go to the modifiers and let's add bevel modifier. And now we'll increase the segments to 2. And let's make the amount a little bit smaller. You can hold shift for smaller increments, something like this. Now in the geometry section, we'll switch the emitter to arc. And if you want to see what that does, let's hit slash on numpad for a local view. And let's inspect one of these corners. And here the original setting was sharp, and that will make a corner like this when you use bevel modifier. But if you use the arc option, you'll see this is much nicer. And it will play well even with the other modifiers. So that's something that I always use probably on the bevel modifier. And then in the shading menu, we can enable harden normals, and that will make everything nice and smooth. So that's the bevel modifier ready. We can now hit slash to exit the local view. And now let's just select everything. You can just drag a selection around your objects and then deselect everything you don't need. In this case, just the bowl. So let's zoom in a little bit. And if you hold Control and just hit it with the box like this, you will see it deselects. And now we need the active objects to have the bevel modifier, which is exactly what we have, because if you have something selected and then you add to the selection like this, the original selection will stay highlighted in yellow, so it's active. But in case you don't have that, so for example, in case you have this one active, you can just hold shift and click through the objects you have selected to make one of them active. And now you will see the bevel modifier appears, and you can easily copy it to the other selected objects by hitting this arrow here and choose copy to select it. So now every one of these objects is beveled, but even though we have harden normals enabled, so the corners look nice and smooth, the objects themselves are not using the smooth shading. So you can see here on the corner, some faces are still visible, so you can right click and shade every object smooth like this. And now this is nice and smooth and ready for some additional details. So let's focus on the ball here. I'll use very simple technique to make this nice and chunky. So let's add solidify modifier. They'll basically just add geometry based on your planar geometry. So let's increase the thickness here like this. And we can additionally stack more modifiers on top of each other. So we can add subdivision surface and increase the levels in the viewport to add more geometry, and you will have this nice result. And now if you right click and shade smooth, this is something you have, even though if you go into the edit mode, this is still the original simple mesh. But I don't like the angle here on top, so I will press Ctrl R and add one more cut. And you can see as you go closer, the subdivision becomes more and more sharp near the top. So I'm interested in something like this here. Okay, that's the bowl. And now let's work with the signage. Let's create some nice Japanese characters here in the front for Ramen. and then some number here on the plate. The brutalist blocky architecture like this really looks great with some like random numbers placed around the scene. So let's start with the sign here in the front. Let's select it and let's tap into the edit mode, and again I will place the cursor here. So go for face select, select this one, hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it. Now tab out and we'll press Shift A and add a text object right here. And now we need to modify this in the object mode, because in the edit mode you're just editing the text itself. So press R, then X and 90 to rotate 90 degrees. And now without moving this, we can go to the text settings and change alignment to center and vertical to middle. And now it will nicely jump into middle of our sign, and we can just press S to scale this down. And now for the ramen sign and for the Japanese signs, if you're doing something like that and you don't know Japanese, which I don't obviously, so it's always good to check other references and outside resources. So just go out there and Google like a ramen shop or something like that, and you will see what signs are displayed there. And now with the AI you can just grab a screenshot and put it in a chat and let the AI explain what's written there, and if you can use it and if it's appropriate in the context you're creating. And then when you're certain, what I like to do is basically just use fonts to create these signs. So for example, I would just go to Google Translate and write ramen and choose Japanese translation. Now you can see these signs, I think this is kanji, so these are like more traditional characters, but you can click here and switch through multiple of these, and this is a writing that is most often visible on the ramen shops, and I think this is called katakana, which is like a phonetical system in Japanese for more foreign words, and this looks really good on the sign. And you can just select it here and press Ctrl C to grab it, and then back in Blender you can just tap into the edit mode and just delete the text and press Ctrl V and paste it here, and you have now native Japanese writing here directly in Blender as a font. And you can just go in and search through different fonts that would support Japanese characters. So for example, here I'll just open font, and in my default fonts folder I can look through these, and if you want to know if the font supports Japanese characters, most of the time it will display the characters there. So for example, I think the Harmony here is a good example. If you open that font, you can see it's like more chunky, nicer display font, and I quite like it, so I'll probably keep it like this. And now the easiest thing in the world, with the font in place, you can just go and modify the geometry here on the text object, and you can just do extrusion like this, and you can even do bevel. So if you increase the bevel, you can see you're rounding the text a little bit. So basically this is now finished. There's no need to do anything with this except adding some materials to it. Maybe the extrusion is too much, so let's reduce it a little bit and press G then Y and move it outside of that sign a little bit like this. So that's the sign for ramen. And now let's hold Shift and right click here and let's enter some number. So let's press Shift A. I will again add the text object, press R then X and 90 to rotate 90 degrees, and then R and Z and 90 to rotate 90 degrees on Z axis. And again, I will modify the alignment here. Tab into the edit mode and rewrite to number. On buildings, something like 01, 02, 03 might always look great, but it's 2026, so let's use 26. I will now tab out and let's modify the font. I will go for something more chunky like Arial Black and press S to scale this down a little bit. But again, now we can just extrude this and we can keep this sharp. This one doesn't need to be rounded. It will be probably from metal or something like that. So let's keep it like this. So that's some additional details for the building. Now the electric box could look nice with some cables going from below, and maybe it could be a little bit higher up like this. Now let's switch the origin point to median again, so we are not transforming this according to the location of the 3D cursor. And now let's shift and right click here and let's press Shift A and we'll add a plane, and now just collapse this into a single vertex. So tab into the edit mode, we can press M to merge and merge everything at center. Now if you switch to the vertex select mode and enable X-ray view, you can see it's not visible because there's an origin point in the middle, but if you in the vertex select mode press E then Z, you will see how this extrudes down and you are now creating a new edge from scratch. So we can look from the side by pressing 3 on a numpad, and press E again to do something like this, and then E, then Z to go further down. I really like this so far, but now I want two cables next to each other, but I want them to copy the radius here. So first of all, let's create it. Let's select these two vertices, press Ctrl Shift B, and let's bevel it like this and reduce the number. We don't need to make this so dense, something like this. But now, if I would just duplicate this, you can see this is not copying the shape nicely. I really want these cables to like go next to each other. So let me delete this. And there's a simple trick, you can do that. You can just select all, press E then X, extrude this, give it some volume, then press A to select all, and Alt E and extrude on normals like before. But be careful, now we have probably flipped normals. If I disable X-ray view, you can see this is now a little bit messed up. So when you have it selected, press Shift N to recalculate normals. So now the extrusion will go in single direction. So again, Alt E and extrude along normals like this. And same as before, we can press S for even thickness and place it in a way where you would like the other cable to go, like this. And now we can deselect this, hold Alt, select this loop, hold Alt and Shift, select the other one, press X and delete the vertices, and we're left with this here in the middle. And now press 2 for edge select, and same as before, we can use Ctrl and Alt to select these edges, and just press X and delete the edges. And now if you look from the side, you have the curve that's perfectly copying the shape of the first one. And now you can just tab out, right click, and convert this to curve. And in the curve settings, there's again geometry section, same as with the fonts, but here you can enable that bevel and it will basically just create pipes or cables for you just like that. 100% the best way to create pipes in Blender. Right click, shade smooth, and basically you're done. You have your cables just like that, and you can do multiple of these around your object. You can do some cables that go like in a more, random or natural way, or you can do pipes like this and then convert them to curves and give them some bevel depth, and you'll have nice details around your scene really easily from a single vertex. And in the same fashion, I will now go ahead and create the chairs here in front of the counter. So let's hold Shift, right click, and let's press Shift A, and we'll add a circle. And I think 18 will be just fine. So tap into the edit mode and press S to make this a little bit smaller, like that. And now press 1 for vertex select. Let's select this one here. Let's look from the top. And let's press Shift D, then Y, and move it towards the middle. Try to match the origin point position like this. And now just press E, then Z, and extrude it up somewhere where the chair will go. Something like this. And now select this one again and press E then Y and extrude this on Y axis like this. And now if you select this one in the middle, you can press Ctrl Shift B for that vertex bevel and do a nice bevel like this and increase number of cuts with the mouse wheel. And now let's select this one, hold Shift S, snap cursor to select it, tab out, and let's press Shift A and we'll add a plane. And now again we'll use the position of the origin point to manipulate the geometry. So let's tap into the edit mode, press G then Y and 1 and confirm with enter. And now if you tab out and scale according to the origin point, you can do something like this. And now we can press G then Z, move this higher up, maybe make the scale a little bit larger. And now press Ctrl A and apply that scale again. Tab in and select these two vertices and bring them closer. So G then Y and move them somewhere here. And now we can just select all of these, press Ctrl Shift B for the bevel. But if it goes beyond like this, you can press C to clamp this, so it won't go beyond the bounds. But now be careful because there are double vertices right here, so we can press A and merge by distance and it will clean that up. And now you can just tab out, hold Shift, select this object, and press Ctrl J to join these. And now if you right click and convert to curve, don't worry if the face was there, it will get thrown away, and now you have a single object that's curve. And in the geometry section you can just increase the bevel depth and you have something like this Again, very easy, straightforward. You can shade this smooth and press Ctrl 1. That's a shortcut for adding subdivision modifier with one level in the viewport. And now you have a nice base for a chair. We can tab into the edit mode, select the top here, hold Shift S and snap cursor to select it, again to be able to place something precisely. But before we do that, let's look from the front, because this is lying here on the ground, so we can press A to select all, enable X-ray view. Now you can see the shape, and we can press G then Z and bring this up so it lies flat on the ground there. Depending on the thickness, of course. So if you change the thickness, you will probably need to readjust this a little bit. So now we can tab out and disable the X-ray view, and we can press Shift A and add a circle. Tab into the edit mode, press S to scale this down like this, press F to fill and E to extrude. Now press Shift D and Z to move this higher up a little bit, and then E to extrude again, and here we can press Ctrl B to create the bevel like this. Now tab out and let's add a bevel modifier here. Let's increase the segments and reduce the amount to create something like this that will give us a nice chair. And again we can press Ctrl 1 to add subdivision, right click and shade smooth. And now just make this maybe a little bit larger. Hold Shift, select the frame, press Ctrl P and parent the object. So now if you select this one and move it around, the whole chair will move. And now select both of these, press Alt D to create a linked duplicate and press X and move it to the side. The linked duplicate means these objects are linked, and whatever you do to one will happen to the other one as well. That's why I used Alt D instead of Shift D to duplicate. Now if you select this one, for example, and change the curve settings, so for example change the bevel depth, you will see it happens to the other one as well. But now I want to rotate this slightly and move it around. I'm using G then Shift Z to exclude the Z axis from the movement. So that's about the chairs. Maybe the counter is now a little bit too low, so let's modify this. Let's select both of these objects, tab into the edit mode, and again we can just use the X-ray view, select these vertices, press G then Z and move them higher up, just like that. Very easy thing to do. And let's look from the camera and toggle the X-ray back. Now I think these could be a little bit more chunky, so they're better visible like this. And now let's finish the ramen decoration on top. So select the bowl, hold Shift S, snap cursor to select it, and let's press Shift A and let's add a circle. Press G then Z, move it up here, and press S to scale it up until it disappears. And now tab into the edit mode and press F to fill. And I want to create some noodles there, and again I will use the curves to do that. So tab out, let's look from the top, and here maybe this camera gets in a way a little bit, so we can just press G then Z twice to move it away. It will do absolutely nothing with the composition, because remember we switched this to orthographic and we're using orthographic scale to zoom in. So now let's look from the top by pressing 7 on a numpad, and let's press Shift A and let's create another plane. Tab into the edit mode, and again we'll press M and merge at center. And now use vertex select and X-ray so we better see what's happening. And here let's press A to select the vertex and press E repeatedly to extrude some noodle shapes like this. Leave some place here for the egg and for the chopsticks. It doesn't need to be dense, so let's select the first one again, press Shift D to duplicate and do something like this. And now here let's duplicate this one. Okay, and now we can tab out, right click and convert to curve, and again we'll add some thickness like this and reduce the resolution to 2. Let's press G then Z, bring it up, and let's disable the X-ray view so we see where it sits like this. And we'll need to close the caps here. You have an option to fill caps, but it doesn't produce very nice geometry for the subdivision. So we'll leave it open and we'll just right click and convert this back to mesh. And now we can just tab into the edit mode and alt click all of these loops. And additionally you can hold Alt and Shift and add all of these other loops to the selection wherever we need to close the shape, and just press F to fill and it will just close it up. So now if you tab out and press Ctrl 2, that will add subdivision surface modifier and create nice noodles like this. And we can right click and shade smooth and press S to make this smaller and move it here. And additionally, if you don't like the shapes, you can always go back, enable X-ray view and select these loops like this, and basically just move them around a little bit if you wish. But all in all, I quite like this. So let's create that egg here. So I'll shift and right click here, press Shift A and add a circle. Now 18 will be a little bit too much, so let's go something like 12 vertices. Tab into the edit mode and press S to scale it down. And now we can select one of these and enable proportional editing. This is another very useful tool when you need to manipulate the mesh. So you don't need to move all of these vertices one by one. You can enable this, press G then Y. And now you can see this large circle, that's the fall off, that's the radius in which the vertices are affected. So if I use the mouse wheel to make this smaller, you'll see I'm moving these vertices like this. But if I make this larger, you will see how they will kind of act like a magnet. They will drag the neighboring vertices with them. And this way we are able to create an egg shape within seconds like this. So now let's disable the proportional editing. Press A to select all and E then Z to extrude like this, and just follow me for now. You will see what I'm about to do. So press F to fill, that will create the face on top, and let's press I to inset to create a supporting loop. But now let's inset this once more, so press I like this, and now I would like to convert this back to circle, and there's a nice native Blender extension to do that, but you need to enable it first. So let's go edit preferences, and in the extensions let's search for loop tools, and you will see I have it here installed. But if you don't have it there, just click install here on the side. If you for some reason don't see it here, you can always look in the add-ons as well, just search for loop tools and you might have it there instead. So extensions or add-ons, search for loop and enable loop tools add-on. This is the one. And the moment you have it enabled, just close the preferences. And now if you right click, you have the loop tools active here, and you can use the circle command, and it will basically convert whatever selection you have back into circle. And now we can press S to scale it down and R to rotate, so the geometry is a little bit nicer, and press G to move it around here. But this is exactly what I wanted to have here, so we can now press E to extrude back down, and now press X and delete the face. Alt click this loop, press Shift D to duplicate and move it down here, so we have another one, and we can press E then Z and extrude the shape here and press F to fill. And again, one more inset, and as you can see this is red, so we need to flip the normals. So let's press A and Shift N to recalculate, and now we can tab out, and if you now add subdivision surface modifier, it will create something like this. Of course, adding one more loop here will tighten it up here, and we can just right click and shade smooth. But this is exactly what I wanted to have here. We can just scale it up a little bit, rotate and move around like this. Now for the chopsticks, we can just select the bowl, hold Shift S, snap cursor to select it, and now let's press Shift A, add a plane. Let's look from the top and let's scale it down like this. That will be the bottom of the chopstick. And now tab into the edit mode and press E to extrude and S to scale it up like this. Now the scale will be all messed up, so tab out and press Ctrl A to apply the scale. And let's go ahead and add bevel modifier here as well. Increase the segments and reduce the radius a little bit. Right click, shade smooth, and you have a nice chopstick. If you look from the front by pressing 1 on a numpad, you can just press R. Since the origin point is here at the bottom of the bowl, you can just press R and lean it against the side here. And you can enable X-ray view so you can see better where it touches the side. And if you want to be really precise, you can bring it up so it doesn't touch, so it doesn't go inside the bowl, but that won't be visible in any way. And now if you look from the top by pressing 7 on a numpad, you can press Alt D to create link duplicate and immediately press R to rotate, and just rotate another one here and press G to slightly position it elsewhere. And now if you look from the front again, we'll press R to lean it against the side of the bowl here, but this is nice bowl with chopsticks, and as a stylized decoration it looks really nice. So let's just select everything here by holding shift with the bowl as last and press Ctrl P and parent to object in case we need to scale this up, down or rotate it later. It's better to have it parented. And now if you hit 0 on a numpad, there is a little bit of a counter visible here, and if you want you can even bring this a little bit closer, and it'll be nice if there's at least something placed there for some additional detail. And you can easily just select the bowl with the chopsticks and press Shift D and just move it outside here. Now select the bowl, press S to scale it down, and you can enable face project snapping here. And now if you press G and hold Ctrl, you're able to snap this on the surface, so for example down here. But now since we rescale this in the object mode, you can see the solidify needs to be a little bit thicker here, and this needs to go a little bit up like this. But all in all, I think this will work nicely as the additional detail. You can, for example, rotate this a little bit, place it here like an empty bowl or something, and now we can shift right click and add a glass here. So we have another detail, tap into the edit mode, press S to scale it down. And as you can see, it's always about these simple primitives, simple shapes, and I will just pick the shape closest to what I'm going to create and then use these simple tools like extrusion, inset, beveling to get what I want. And I'm reusing a lot of geometry, duplicating a lot of geometry. So once you're fluent with all of these tools that I'm showing you here, you will have no problem creating whatever you want to do. So press F to fill this and E to extrude. And again, press X and delete the face on top. Alt click the bottom loop, press Ctrl B to create a bevel. But we don't need it so dense, so with the mouse wheel reduce it to something like 3. And since I want to use the same technique as here, I will press Ctrl R and place the loop cut right here, because I know I will use the subdivision surface here. So let's tab out, and again I will use solidify and then Ctrl 2 to add subdivision surface, right click, shade smooth, and there's my glass. So if I look through the camera again, we can position it a little bit to the side here, so it kind of just peeks from the side like that. And basically that's all of the modeling done. Now let's bring in some materials, and what I like to do is to keep colors and materials pretty limited and reuse them as much as possible, and that way you will always get more coherent result than if you just go wild with your colors and create material for each object separately. So for example here, I really want to make this wall, you know, bright, have a lot of metallic objects in the scene, and then some accent color, for example red. So let's hold Z, switch to the material preview, and let's start applying some of these materials. So for example, for this ground object, let's create a ground material, and I would like this to be, you know, a little bit darker like this. And then let's select the wall here, and here we can go something softer like this, and maybe something towards the yellow, but I will keep this neutral for now. And let's take care of these metallic objects. So for example here, let's create a new one, let's call this metal, and let's increase the metallic all the way to 1 and reduce the brightness tiny bit, and let's just apply it wherever we think, you know, some metal material might look great. So for example, here on the frame around the building, I think that's a great place, and for the sign as well. And now here I want to apply the same metal material, but we have this as a single object, so we have two options. So we either detach this geometry or we use another material slot. So in the object mode, you can just hit plus here and apply different material, but now you need to go into the edit mode. And if you don't have it selected, you can just hover over one part and hit L, and whatever is linked and is disconnected from the rest of the mesh will get selected. And now you can just hit assign, and that will assign the new material to your object. And now I want to give the same material to this one, and here we can create something like a wooden color. So there's already material in place because the building had material, so we can just remove it, create a new one, and add some nice like a wooden color. And for this particular object, I think a little bit more of the bevel would look nice, so let's keep it like this for a while. And here again, metallic material, and for the bottom of the chair as well. But then on top we'll use the same technique as here. We'll just create a new material slot, create a new material, and that will be our accent color. So let's do something like red with reduced roughness. And now if you tab into the edit mode, you can just click away, hover here and hit L and hit assign, and that will apply the material, but the roughness is a little bit too low. So let's do something like this. And now let's add the same material to the bowl and to our writing. So this is something I had in mind here. Now I can clearly see this bites into the bowl a little bit, so I will just tilt it a little bit back, and let's add some material here as well. We can just reuse the one that we used for wood, something like this, and then create something different for the noodles. Let's do like a brighter material with reduced roughness, something like that. And this can be, and I want to make this a little bit darker, but we need to duplicate the material because we used it down here. So let's just duplicate it and make it a little bit darker. And now select the chopstick and use the wooden material there. I think that's the one. And we can use the same material for these down here. And for the bowl, we can just use glossy white material. And for the egg, let's go a little bit darker like this. Let's go down with roughness. And let's create a new material slot. Let's create that same material here, but we can duplicate this and change the color. Tab into the edit mode and use and assign this the same way as before. And now here I want to use the same metal material, and for the curb as well. So as you can see, basically I just created 3 or 4 materials and then just duplicated some of these to differentiate the colors, but I kept the palette pretty narrow, and it kind of already gives the illustration a little bit of a character if you don't have colors all over the place. Now when it comes to signs, I really like to give these signs a little bit of an emission, but if you just select this material and make it emissive, you will lose some of its volume and it will just be blown away basically depending on the intensity of the light emission. So what I like to do instead is to press G then Y, move it a little bit back here, and then press Shift D then Y, move it back here, and remove the extrusion. Let's set this to 0. And you can see there will be another layer here, and of course remove the bevel, set this to 0 as well. So now you have really flat writing here in the back, and you can now remove the material, create a new one, let's call this neon, and switch the principled shader to emission. But I want to render this with cycles anyway, so let's go to render settings, switch this to cycles. I will enable GPU denoising and GPU denoising for the final render, and for the samples I will use something like 1024. And now if I hold Z and do rendered preview, this is the real-time cycles preview, and we can see the emission happening there. So now if you go back to the material and increase the strength to something like 10, you have a nice glow there. And you can hold Shift, select the original one, press Ctrl P and parent. So now you're able to move this closer and further back. You have these two objects linked, and you can create a nice sign with a nice backlight like this. And you can of course change the color to make it similar to the color of your sign. And we can do the same thing here on the number. So I will just press Shift D to duplicate this, press X, move it back, remove the extrusion right here. Press G, then X, move it closer like this, and hold Shift and parent it like this. And now just select the one in the back. If you just click multiple times through objects, you will eventually select the one you want. And now in the materials, let's just remove and just assign the neon material here. But now you can just duplicate it and change the color. So that's another easy way how to backlight with different color. And this is the way I like to start lighting my objects. I will just add lights wherever they're in the real life. So for example, on the signs, then I will probably do some light here inside of the building, and only then I will proceed with the exterior lighting. So here inside, we can just reset the cursor to world origin. So hold Shift S and reset it. Press Shift A and let's add light and a point light. I will press G then Z and move it up here towards the roof. Don't go all the way too much so it doesn't disappear. And then we'll change the color to something warmer like this. But I'd like this to be a little bit more dramatic. So let's hold Shift and right click here and let's add a spotlight. Press G then Z, move it up here like this. And we can look from the front, press Alt D and create another one like this in kind of symmetrical way. And now we can increase the power. With the spotlights you need to go higher up, so let's try something like 500. That's maybe too much, but let's increase the blend so they're softer on the sides there, and let's increase the angle. And now we can go back on that power to something like 250 or 150 maybe. And here we can go much warmer. And now you have nice spotlights here in the middle. So now let's figure out some exterior lighting. I will hold Shift S and reset to world origin. And let's press Shift A and we'll add a plane. And just press S and make it large. That'll be our background. And let's look from the front and press G then Z and move this down here like this. Now if you look from the camera, if you want to save some render performance, you can press Ctrl B and limit your render only to camera bounds. So only what's within the camera shot will get rendered. So for example, now if I add material to this background object, let's call this BG, and for example change it to something blue, you will see only this changes. So now let's keep it something simple and dark. And now let's reset the cursor once more and let's press Shift A and let's add sunlight. And we can press G then Z, move it up. It doesn't really matter where it is because it's directional light. It doesn't really matter how far it is from the object, but I like to rotate it around the 3D cursor. So let's switch the pivot point to 3D cursor. You can do it right here. And now let's press R then X and let's do something like 30 degrees and minus. So it shines from the back here. And now R then Z and 90 degrees. So it goes from the side. And I think this is a nice start for the lighting. And now let's give this more strength, something like 3 or 2 maybe. And yeah, let's do 3 and a little bit warmer light. And now I like to supply this with some area light shining from the back. So let's press Shift A and let's add area light. Press G then Z, move it up. Make it larger. And then press R then X. Rotate it like this, and R then Z and go to the opposite side like this. Maybe I went too high, so remember you can always press R then X twice and rotate around the 3D cursor like this. So let's position it in the back here and let's do something like 1500, something really strong. And now it kind of starts to work here. And let's change this to disk and let's give this a little bit colder color like that. And let's select the background and the material. Let's give this full roughness and make this much darker like this. And now the ground needs to have more roughness as well and needs to be a little bit darker probably. But now this starts to work together much better. And next I want to add some additional area lights around. And of course you can always press G then Z twice to bring the area light closer or further away, and you can watch these reflections and basically find the best outcome, something like this. And now we can press Shift D, then RZ, and rotate this to the other side until some new reflections appear on this side. Press R, then X twice, bring it lower down, and G then Z twice to bring it further away. We want this much weaker, and we want to change color to something warm, like that. And press Shift D, RZ again, and bring this to the other side. And again, I want just a touch of light here from the side, and I want to do a different color here, something like this. And now we can play with the color of the background, so we can maybe make it a little bit more saturated, like this. And maybe now this point light can be a little bit brighter here, so let's bring the power up. Okay, like this. And now if you select the world color and start playing with the brightness and color, you will start to blend everything together a little bit more. Another thing that's great for blending the scene together is volumetric fog. So let's press Shift A and we'll add a cube, and let's just press S to scale it up like this until it covers the camera. And now let's add a new material. Let's call this fog. And we can find this cube here and rename to fog as well in the outliner, so we can better find it if we need. And now just remove the principled shader from the surface option here, and in the volume option let's add principled volume. It will go dark because the density is too high, but if you set it to something really low like 0.01, you will see you have nice fog here. And now if you play with the color of the fog, it will nicely blend the scene together, and you immediately have much softer, completely different lighting and different result in your scene. And you can additionally place some other lights. So for example, you can select this one, press Shift D to duplicate it, press G then Z, bring it down here, and Alt R to reset the rotation so it shines directly on the background there. And bring it closer and make it much stronger, something like 3000, and you can make this smaller. And this way you can kind of create this halo and change the color a little bit like this, so it gets a little bit more visual interest. And finally, we can play with these emissions. Maybe now this is a little bit too weak, so we can do something like 30 and get the whole thing further away from the sign so it's a little bit brighter. And now we can go to the render settings, color management, and play with some contrast settings. So with the foggy scenes like this, something like high contrast tends to work great, and we can bring up the exposure if the scene is a little bit too dark, something like this here. But there's one more step you can do to make this instantly better, and that's to add some textures or texture details. So either you can go and find, for example, some concrete textures for the building or for the ground, or you can do some procedural texturing. So with the procedural texturing, I will just grab the new window here and switch this to shader editor, and I will change the ground plane here to something more interesting. Let's zoom in a little bit, and basically I will just add a noise texture here. So let's press Shift A and let's add texture and a noise, and let's just connect the texture to the surface shader so we can see how it looks. You can see this is now just like a blobby, blurry noise. But we can work with the scale here, and we can bring up the detail, and we can bring up the roughness here. And now we can bring up the mapping and texture coordinate. And let's use object coordinates like this. So you have a texture coordinate node with object, and this maps your noise texture to your object. And now here you can press Shift A, add a color ramp, plug it here. This is now disconnected, by the way, because I plugged this directly to the surface. And you can now bring these closer together to give this more contrast. And now if you play with the scale, you will get something like this. And we're interested in really small scale, something like that will look nice. So let me zoom out here. So this is the texture setup you can replicate. Let me zoom in a little bit closer so you can better see what's happening here. So just set up these nodes as you can see here, and you will get some nice grungy noise. And then you can just use something like a mix color node. So let's press Shift A, let's do mix color, plug it here, but you need to go into the factor. And here you can basically just make this dark as it was, and now use different color here to mix these together. Something really subtle should work okay. And now you can just plug the principal shader again, it will plug into the base color, and you will get something much more interesting than before. So this is very simple, you know, grungy setup that will make your materials more sophisticated, and you can then use and plug this into different channels as well. So for example, the metallic material looks really flat here. So let me just grab this noise setup here, press Ctrl C, and let's select the metal material and press Ctrl V to plug this back in. But here I won't use this to drive the color, but instead I will plug this into the roughness. But now this is too strong because as you can see we're going from black all the way to white, so it's either no roughness or full roughness. So we need to be much more subtle with this. So for example, with the black color we can go something like this, and then we can select the white color and bring it closer, and we'll kind of remove that difference in roughness and create a nice metal material. But whenever it's hit by the light you can see the difference in roughness there. Maybe it's still too low, so I would probably bring this a little bit higher and the other color even higher like this. And then same as before, you can play with the scale here. You can go something like 0.05 maybe, so it's a little bit more subtle, but you get more sophisticated reflections with the metal material. So that's the scene with the lighting, and now we can, for example, animate the camera a little bit so it kind of rotates around the scene if you want. It's really easy to do. We'll just set the animation length from 1 to 120 frames, and in the output settings we'll set the FPS to 30. So now this will be 4 seconds of animation, and let's just press Shift A and we'll add an empty. Let's make this a little bit larger here so it's better seen and easily selected here. And now we'll just parent the camera to this empty. So let's go back to the camera, select it, hold Shift and select that empty, press Ctrl P and parent to object. So now if you rotate the empty, the camera will rotate with it, so you can now easily control the round table animation. And we can press N for the side panel, and with the empty selected we can create a new keyframe on the Z rotation. So let's right click and insert single keyframe, and now let's press Shift D and duplicate this keyframe to frame 121. So it will be the same in the beginning and in the end of the animation, so that way this will loop. And now in the third of an animation you can just press R then Z and rotate this slightly like this, right click and insert single keyframe here. It will create a new one, and now just go somewhere here and rotate to the other side like this, right click and insert single keyframe. And now if you play back the animation it will act like this, but it doesn't look great because it will stop and then start moving again. So if you want continuous animation, you can hit Ctrl and Tab here in the timeline, or you can just switch to graph editor when you click here between timeline and graph editor. And now this is how the animation looks. You can hold Ctrl and middle mouse button to scale the view like this. And now what we need to do is to just select the first keyframe and move the handle like this, so it already starts in the movement. And here we need to move this like that, and this will kind of naturally connect to this shape right here. And now if you play it back you can see this is now continuous looping animation, but here we went a little bit too far, so you can just always grab the keyframe, press G then Y and move it higher up so it's not so aggressive. And then of course you can move it on the x-axis as well to adjust the timing, and now you will have something much more natural. And now if you want to render out your animation, just go into the output settings and switch the media type from image to video, and in the encoding I will choose MP4, and basically that's it. Now only choose your folder here and then go render animation and wait out your frames, and your animation will be ready. If you just want a static illustration, go to frame 1. You can go to the rendering workspace and just hit render image and wait it out. Just be careful, this is now set to 4000 samples, so when you want to render that animation, go even lower. Something like 128 for this kind of animation would be probably okay, maybe 256 if you want a little bit better quality, because the lower samples, the more the denoising will be visible in your animation. So that's it for this year's first Blender lesson. I really hope you enjoyed this and that it will help you to kickstart your Blender journey in 2026. Again, if you want to learn more, dive deeper, learn more styles, you can always visit my website. The link is in the description, and you will learn everything from simple low poly design all the way to characters illustration, and with the latest one, full car animation with environment and everything. So again, I really hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, leave that like, and if you're new around here, hit that subscribe. Thank you all for watching and have a wonderful day.